My mother keeps defending her doctor, swearing he's completely professional and trustworthy. But she has no idea I've uncovered undeniable proof that they're secretly involved, and their relationship goes far beyond what's ethical or appropriate. At the age of 17, my mother blindsided me with the news. I required a different gynecologist. This startling revelation came as she casually flipped pancakes, a saccharine smile fixed on her face, as if sharing exciting news about a birthday celebration rather than seizing control of my most personal medical attention. Immediate panic set in. The appointment was already scheduled for that very afternoon, arranged without any inquiry into my comfort or preferences. My mother had a lifelong habit of disregarding my personal limits. When I inquired about my previous gynecologist's sudden retirement, she barely glanced up from the stovetop, waving her spatula away as she claimed she sought a superior doctor for me. The untruth hung heavy and acrid in the space between us. The journey to Dr. Townsend's office should have served as my initial clear warning. My mother had transformed herself for this simple medical visit, applying a full face of cosmetics and donning her finest attire, as though attending a social gathering. She compulsively checked her reflection in every mirror, and her anxious anticipation emanated through the vehicle in waves, causing my stomach to churn with apprehension. Dr. Townsend's practice was situated in one of those gleaming medical high-rises that exuded wealth and prominence. The moment we stepped through those doors, my mother's entire demeanor shifted into a flirtatious energy I had never witnessed. She giggled at his polite commonplaces and touched his arm when he commended her decision to bring me to such a reputable establishment. My skin crawled observing this display unfold. Inside the examination room, Dr. Townsend disregarded every professional boundary imaginable. He barraged me with intrusive inquiries about my mother's romantic life, her professional timetable, and how she was coping with her recent separation from my father. Each query felt like an intrusion, but when I sought my mother's protection, she simply nodded encouragingly and urged me to respond truthfully. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical examination ever could. Their hushed conversation in the corridor afterward sent a chill through my veins. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to catch fragments of their intimate discussion regarding future availability and scheduling preferences. This was not typical doctor-parent communication. This was something far more sinister and personal. My mother practically floated out of that building, radiating contentment as she raved about Dr. Townsend's expertise and professionalism. Then came the bombshell that shattered any lingering hope this was legitimate medical care. She announced I would require weekly monitoring for irregular cycles, a complete fabrication since my periods had been perfectly regular my entire life. The second appointment confirmed my gravest fears. Dr. Townsend's examination became more invasive and improper, while he peppered me with personal questions about appreciating my caring mother, and whether I recognized how fortunate I was to have someone so invested in my healthcare. Meanwhile, my mother sat in the corner, beaming with pride as if watching her favorite romantic comedy instead of her daughter being exploited by a medical predator. Week after week, this nightmarish routine persisted, with my mother dressing up for each visit and arriving early for private discussions with Dr. Townsend. I began to notice she possessed detailed knowledge about my appointments that I had never shared with her. The final piece of evidence that eradicated any remaining doubt arrived 3 weeks into this horrifying ordeal. My mother's phone illuminated with a text from someone saved as DT, complete with a heart emoji. The message referenced their dinner date the previous night, and how much he enjoyed spending time with her. The realization struck me like a physical blow. My mother was romantically involved with my gynecologist, and using my body as leverage for their distorted connection. When I confronted her with the proof, she launched into a vicious campaign of psychological manipulation, labeling me paranoid, envious, and ungrateful for questioning her judgment. She asserted I was imagining connections that did not exist, and that Dr. Townsend was simply providing thorough professional care. My demand to switch doctors was met with absolute refusal and threats about disrupting my treatment plan. Now I am trapped in this disturbing cycle, knowing that every appointment fuels their relationship while violating every boundary I have left. I lay awake that night, my mind racing through every appointment, every interaction, every warning sign I'd overlooked. The treachery felt like acid consuming my chest. I grabbed my phone and began typing notes, documenting everything I could recall. Times, dates, conversations, the way Dr. Townsend's questions had no relation to medical care. My fingers trembled as I constructed a timeline, seeing the pattern emerge with sickening clarity. Morning arrived too quickly. I found my mother in the kitchen humming as she prepared coffee. The confrontation erupted from me before I could restrain it. I informed her I knew about her relationship with Dr. Townsend, that I'd seen the messages, that I understood what she'd been doing. Her face underwent a rapid transformation from shock to anger to calculated coldness. She slammed her coffee mug down so hard it fractured. Within minutes, she was on the phone with Dr. Townsend, arranging an emergency consultation for my behavioral issues and paranoid delusions. I watched her pace the kitchen using terms like resistant and confrontational, while casting warning glances my way. My stomach sank as I realized she was doubling down instead of retreating. At school, I located Sarah by her locker. I needed to confide in someone, but the words caught in my throat. I managed to explain that my mother was compelling me to see a doctor. I didn't trust that something was amiss. Sarah's eyes widened with concern, but I couldn't bring myself to reveal the full horror of the situation. She squeezed my hand and promised to be there if I needed her. The afternoon appointment loomed like a storm cloud. I weighed my options, refused to go and face my mother's fury, or attend and try to gather more evidence. My hands shook as I made my decision. I would go, but this time I'd be prepared. I downloaded a voice recording application and tested it in my pocket, ensuring it could clearly capture conversations. My mother drove us to the appointment in tense silence. At the office, I activated the recording app before we entered the examination room. Dr. Townsend's demeanor was different this time, more clinical and detached. He made pointed notes about my attitude and asked probing questions about my family relationships and whether I was accepting of change. Every word felt like a snare. When I attempted to leave the exam room before he finished his questions, he immediately pulled out his phone. I watched him type rapidly, and within seconds my mother's phone vibrated. The swiftness of their communication revealed just how established their connection had become. She burst through the door moments later, apologizing for my behavior. My mother arrived 20 minutes before the appointment was supposed to conclude. Through the thin walls, I overheard their intimate conversation in the hallway while I dressed. They discussed dinner plans and how to manage my resistance. Dr. Townsend's professional facade completely vanished as he spoke to her in soft, familiar tones. That evening my phone rang. It was my father, his voice tight with apprehension. He inquired about my medical symptoms that my mother had reported to him. Apparently, she called him with a story about hormonal imbalances and necessary treatments. I wanted to scream the truth, but something restrained me. I needed more proof before drawing him into this nightmare. Late that night, while my mother showered, I crept into her bedroom. My heart pounded as I searched through her belongings, knowing I was overstepping a boundary, but desperate for answers. In her nightstand drawer, I discovered her appointment calendar. My breath hitched when I saw the hearts drawn next to every appointment with Dr. Townsend, along with personal notes about their discussions. My phone buzzed with screenshots I'd managed to capture of their text conversations before she'd started deleting them. The messages discussed my resistance to treatment and how to manage my difficult behavior. One message from 2 months before my first appointment sent a shiver down my spine. They'd been seeing each other before she'd even switched my doctors. The next morning my father called again, this time suggesting I might benefit from therapy for my medical anxiety. My mother's manipulation campaign was succeeding. She portrayed me as an unstable teenager, refusing necessary medical care. I realized I was fighting a battle on multiple fronts. Over the next few days, my mother's control tightened like a noose. She started checking my phone regularly, deleted social media applications, and restricted my after-school activities. Everything was framed as concern for my health, but I recognized it for what it was: an isolation campaign designed to cut me off from potential support. At school, the counselor pulled me aside to discuss my frequent medical absences. I wanted to tell her everything, but the words wouldn't come. How could I explain that my mother was using me as a pawn in her romantic relationship? The counselor's concern was genuine, but I could see she had no real power to help. The school nurse proved more receptive when I tentatively mentioned my discomfort with my new doctor. She listened carefully, her expression growing troubled, but she explained the harsh reality. Parents had ultimate authority over their minor children's medical decisions. Without concrete evidence of abuse, her hands were tied. I recalled my mother mentioning that Dr. Martinez, our previous gynecologist, had retired. Something about that story had never felt right to me. I reached out to Catherine, a family friend who'd also been his patient. When I casually inquired about his retirement, she looked confused. Dr. Martinez was still practicing, still accepting new patients. The lie struck me like a physical blow. The confirmation from Catherine left me reeling. I spent the rest of that afternoon in my room processing the calculated nature of my mother's deception. She hadn't just stumbled into this relationship. She'd orchestrated every detail, including the falsehood about Dr. Martinez retiring. My hands shook as I added this revelation to my growing documentation file. My mother's campaign to depict me as troubled intensified. Over the following week, she informed our extended family I was experiencing typical teenage rebellion issues related to necessary medical care. During Sunday dinner at my grandmother's house, I overheard her explaining my supposed hormonal imbalances to my aunts and uncles. The sympathetic glances they gave me made my skin crawl. They believed her completely. I recognized the systematic nature of her isolation tactics. Each conversation with family members included subtle warnings about my mental state. She portrayed herself as the concerned mother dealing with a difficult daughter who refused proper medical treatment. The narrative was so meticulously constructed that challenging it made me appear exactly as unstable as she claimed. My aunt noticed something was amiss during a community fundraiser the following weekend. She witnessed my mother and Dr. Townsend together near the silent auction tables. Their body language spoke volumes. The way he touched the small of her back, how she leaned into him when they thought no one was watching. My aunt's expression shifted from confusion to concern when she saw my face across the room. Later that evening, my aunt pulled me aside in the kitchen, while everyone else mingled in the living room. She mentioned seeing my mother with Dr. Townsend, carefully observing my reaction. I fought to keep my expression neutral, but something in my eyes must have betrayed me. She squeezed my shoulder gently and told me she was there if I ever needed to talk. The small crack in my mother's carefully constructed facade gave me hope. I began documenting everything more systematically. Each appointment time, every interaction, all the contradictions in my mother's stories. I created spreadsheets on my laptop, backing them up to multiple cloud services in case she discovered them on my device. My research into medical ethics violations revealed I needed an adult advocate and concrete evidence to file a complaint. The process seemed overwhelming for a 17-year-old, but I methodically worked through the requirements. I learned about mandatory reporting, professional boundaries, and the specific violations that could result in license revocation. Building a relationship with the school nurse became my primary focus. I visited her office between classes, initially complaining about headaches and fatigue. Gradually, I shared more about my situation. She listened without judgment. Her professional training was evident in how she asked careful questions without leading me. Her growing concern validated what I already knew. This wasn't normal. During my next appointment with Dr. Townsend, his receptionist made an offhand comment about my mother's frequent calls to the office. She mentioned it while checking me in, noting that most parents didn't communicate so regularly about routine appointments. The casual observation felt like another piece of evidence falling into place. My mother scheduled what she called a comprehensive hormonal evaluation for the following week. The appointment would require an entire day at the medical office for various tests. When I questioned the necessity, she dismissed my concerns and insisted Dr. Townsend knew what was best for my health. Her dismissive attitude only strengthened my resolve. The school nurse agreed to document our conversations and help me find an appropriate advocate. She couldn't directly intervene, but she could create an official record of my concerns. She also provided me with resources about minors' rights in medical situations, though she emphasized the limitations within the current system. My mother's mask began slipping under the pressure of maintaining her deception. I watched her snap at a grocery store clerk over a minor issue, her usual composed demeanor cracking. She apologized immediately, but I recognized the stress fractures forming in her carefully maintained image. The effort of juggling her secret relationship while managing my resistance was taking its toll. Dr. Townsend prescribed a series of hormone tests that would require multiple visits over the coming weeks. When I researched the tests online, I discovered they were typically reserved for patients with specific symptoms I'd never experienced. The unnecessary medical procedures added another layer to their violation of my autonomy and trust. My aunt's private questioning of my mother's explanations created ripples through our extended family. She didn't directly challenge the medical necessity narrative, but she asked pointed questions about the frequency of appointments and the sudden change in doctors. Other family members began noticing the inconsistencies in my mother's stories. I discovered my mother had been sharing intimate details about my physical development with Dr. Townsend through their text exchanges. Screenshots I managed to capture before she deleted them showed conversations about my body that made me feel violated in ways I couldn't fully articulate. The complete disregard for my privacy was documented in their own words. The dynamic at home shifted as my mother realized her influence was limited to our household. She couldn't control what happened at school or how extended family members perceived the situation. Her frustration manifested in tighter restrictions on my activities, all justified as necessary for my medical care. During a family barbecue, I overheard my mother bragging to her friend about her wonderful new relationship. She spoke in hushed tones near the garden, unaware I was sitting on the other side of the hedge. Her giddy description of their romance made me physically ill. I wrote down everything I heard while the memory was fresh. My relationship with my aunt strengthened as she witnessed more concerning behavior. She never directly asked me about the situation, but she made sure I knew she was available. Her presence at family gatherings became a source of comfort, a reminder that not everyone was under my mother's influence. I started refusing to answer Dr. Townsend's personal questions during appointments. When he asked about my home life or my mother's happiness, I simply stared at him silently. My resistance clearly frustrated him, and I watched his professional facade crack as he made notes about my non-compliance with increasing agitation. The contradictions in his medical explanations became more apparent when I asked specific questions. He stumbled over his reasoning for certain tests, sometimes contradicting his previous statements. I documented each inconsistency, building a clear pattern of unnecessary medical interventions designed to maintain access to me. The school nurse connected me with a medical ethics advocate who explained the complaint process. The advocate couldn't directly intervene, but provided crucial information about documenting violations and the types of evidence that carried weight in professional reviews. This connection felt like the first real step toward ending my nightmare. My mother's sister began sharing her concerns with other family members about recent behavioral changes. She noticed how my mother prioritized Dr. Townsend over family obligations, canceling long-standing plans to accommodate his schedule. The pattern became impossible to ignore as more relatives compared notes. Multiple family members started recognizing how my mother's focus had shifted away from my actual well-being. Her conversations always circled back to Dr. Townsend's expertise rather than addressing their questions about my health. The consensus building among family members happened organically as they pieced together their observations. Through the school advocate program, I gained access to counseling resources. The counselor helped me process the trauma while maintaining strict confidentiality. Having a professional validate my experience provided immense relief after months of gaslighting and manipulation. During one appointment, I directly confronted Dr. Townsend about his relationship with my mother. His momentary panic before recovering his professional demeanor confirmed everything. He tried to deflect, claiming I was misinterpreting a professional relationship, but his nervous energy betrayed him. Several family members approached me privately to apologize for initially dismissing my concerns. They admitted they should have questioned the sudden medical changes and frequent appointments. Their validation helped restore my confidence after months of being portrayed as unstable and difficult. Questions about Dr. Townsend's professional conduct began spreading beyond our immediate family. Other patients started comparing experiences, and his reputation suffered as inconsistencies in his practice became apparent. The small medical community couldn't ignore the mounting concerns. A former nurse from Dr. Townsend's previous practice reached out to the medical ethics advocate. She shared that similar concerns had been raised before, though never formally documented. Her testimony confirmed a pattern of boundary violations that predated his relationship with my mother. When my mother suggested my younger cousin should also see Dr. Townsend for a consultation, I intervened immediately. I pulled my aunt aside and shared just enough information to ensure she would refuse. Protecting my cousin from potential harm felt like breaking the cycle of violation. Key family members began uniting around supporting my version of events. The evidence had become too substantial to ignore, and my consistent testimony across months of manipulation carried weight. My mother's attempts to discredit me rang hollow against the documented pattern of deception. Her attempts to schedule additional appointments meant increasing resistance from both me and supportive family members. She couldn't justify the medical necessity to skeptical relatives, who now questioned every aspect of her narrative. The loss of control visible in her eyes gave me hope. My father witnessed my mother's inappropriate behavior toward Dr. Townsend during a chance encounter at the medical building. He'd arrived to pick me up from an appointment and saw them in the parking garage. Their intimate embrace left no room for misinterpretation. His shocked expression when our eyes met said everything. My reputation within the family was restored as the truth became undeniable. Relatives who had pitted me for my supposed mental health issues now saw me as a victim of manipulation who had fought to expose the truth. The shift in perception felt like vindication after months of character assassination. The medical advocate confirmed that a formal complaint had been filed, and the initial review process had started. While she couldn't share details about the investigation, she assured me that the evidence was being taken seriously. The official nature of the proceedings meant Dr. Townsend would face real scrutiny. An extended family gathering approached where my mother would have to face unified questioning about the situation. The prospect clearly terrified her as she made excuses to avoid attending. When it became clear she couldn't escape, Her anxiety manifested in frantic attempts to control the narrative. Dr. Townsend revealed his true nature by pressuring my mother to keep their relationship hidden to protect his career. I overheard her crying on the phone as he insisted she deny everything if questioned by medical boards. His selfishness in prioritizing his license over her well-being exposed the relationship's exploitative foundation. I faced a choice between maintaining family peace and protecting myself from further harm. The decision felt impossible, but I knew continuing the appointments would cause lasting damage. My resolve to prioritize my safety over family harmony marked a crucial turning point in reclaiming my autonomy. The family confrontation arrived sooner than expected when multiple relatives demanded answers at a birthday celebration. I handled their questions with unexpected maturity, presenting facts without emotional manipulation. My calm demeanor contrasted sharply with my mother's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain her false narrative. Key family members explicitly rejected my mother's manipulation tactics. They called out her contradictions and refused to accept her tearful pleas for understanding. The unified front of support gave me strength I hadn't felt in months. Truth prevailed through the documented evidence and my consistent testimony across multiple conversations. Family members who had investigated independently corroborated crucial details. The weight of collective discovery crushed my mother's carefully constructed deception. My mother agreed to find a new doctor for me, seemingly accepting defeat. Her compliance felt too easy. After months of resistance, I remained wary of her sudden cooperation, recognizing it as another potential manipulation rather than genuine change. She began making promises about respecting my boundaries and letting me choose my own healthcare providers. The performance felt hollow, especially when she continued texting Dr. Townsend throughout family discussions. Her inability to fully let go revealed the superficial nature of her compliance. Late one evening, I overheard my mother on the phone in her bedroom. She spoke in hushed tones, but her words carried through the thin walls. She was planning to maintain her relationship with Dr. Townsend while appearing to comply with family demands. The deception would continue, just hidden more carefully. The medical advocate called with an update that made my hands shake. The initial review had uncovered enough concerning patterns to warrant a full investigation. She explained that Dr. Townsend's current nurse had come forward with her own observations about inappropriate boundary crossings with multiple patients. My documentation wasn't standing alone anymore. My relationships with supportive family members deepened through our shared struggle. My aunt started checking in daily, and my grandmother began questioning why she'd been kept in the dark about my mother's behavior. The family dynamic shifted as more relatives recognized the manipulation they'd witnessed, but hadn't fully understood. During a routine check-in with the medical advocate, she revealed that Dr. Townsend's nurse had documented several instances where he'd asked inappropriate personal questions about patients' family members. The pattern matched my experience exactly. The nurse's professional credibility added weight to my claims that teenage testimony alone might not have carried. I spent an afternoon organizing my complete documentation into a coherent presentation. Screenshots, calendar entries, recorded conversations, and written observations filled multiple folders. The medical advocate reviewed everything with me, confirming that my evidence painted a clear picture of systematic boundary violations and exploitation. The advocate called again with significant news. The preliminary findings from the medical board's investigation supported multiple ethics violation charges. Dr. Townsend would face a formal hearing, and my testimony would be crucial. The validation felt overwhelming after months of being portrayed as delusional. The investigation revealed the full scope of Dr. Townsend's inappropriate conduct. Other patients had experienced similar boundary violations, though none had been exploited through a parental relationship like mine. The pattern showed a practitioner who consistently blurred professional lines, using his position to pursue personal interests. My documentation proved invaluable to the investigation. Every screenshot, every recorded conversation, every detailed note validated aspects of my claims. The medical advocate praised my systematic approach, noting that my evidence provided the clearest picture of Dr. Townsend's methods. The advocate presented the investigation's findings to my family during a formal meeting. The evidence showed a clear pattern of Dr. Townsend exploiting his professional position, with my case representing the most egregious violation. Family members who doubted me sat in stunned silence as the full scope became clear. My mother launched a desperate campaign to salvage her reputation. She called family members individually, claiming I was mentally unstable and had manipulated evidence. Her accusations grew more elaborate with each conversation, painting me as a vindictive teenager destroying an innocent relationship. My father initially wavered when my mother suggested I needed a psychiatric evaluation. Her tears and accusations made him question what he'd witnessed with his own eyes. She insisted that teenagers could be master manipulators, and that I'd orchestrated everything out of jealousy over her finding happiness after their divorce. Some family members found themselves questioning their own judgment under my mother's relentless psychological pressure. She knew exactly which emotional buttons to push with each relative, exploiting their fears about mental illness and family loyalty. The manipulation tactics she'd perfected on me were now directed at anyone who supported me. My father scheduled a psychiatric consultation, presenting it as a way to definitively settle the question of my mental stability. The appointment felt like another violation, but I recognized the strategic value. If a professional confirmed my mental health, it would eliminate my mother's primary weapon against me. I chose to attend the evaluation with complete honesty. The psychiatrist, a woman with decades of experience, listened carefully as I presented my documentation and explained the situation. Her questions were thorough but respectful, focusing on my emotional responses and coping mechanisms rather than challenging my reality. The psychiatric evaluation validated everything. The psychiatrist's report confirmed that I showed no signs of delusional thinking or manipulation. Instead, she documented clear evidence of trauma from prolonged gaslighting and boundary violations. Her professional assessment destroyed my mother's narrative completely. An extended family meeting was called where all evidence would be presented formally. The gathering included grandparents, aunts, uncles, and several cousins. My mother arrived looking haggard, her usual polished appearance abandoned. She sat isolated at one end of the room while family members avoided eye contact. The meeting began with a medical advocate presenting the investigation findings. Family members listened in growing horror as she detailed Dr. Townsend's pattern of boundary violations. When she reached my specific case, several relatives gasped at the evidence of my mother's complicity. Multiple witnesses came forward during the meeting. My aunt described witnessing inappropriate interactions at the community fundraiser. My father detailed the intimate embrace he'd observed. Even family friends shared observations they dismissed at the time, but now recognized as red flags. The psychiatrist's report became the turning point. Her clinical assessment confirmed my stability, while documenting the psychological harm I'd endured. Family members who'd wavered under my mother's manipulation campaign couldn't argue with professional evaluation. I faced a choice between pursuing legal action or accepting a family-based resolution. The medical advocate explained my options, including civil proceedings against both my mother and Dr. Townsend. The decision weighed heavily, knowing that legal action would create permanent fractures in family relationships. I chose healing over punishment. The decision surprised everyone, including myself. But I recognized that pursuing legal action would keep me trapped in this nightmare for years. I wanted to reclaim my life, not spend it in courtrooms reliving trauma. My choice created immediate accountability. Without the threat of legal consequences hanging over her head, my mother had to face the full weight of family judgment. She couldn't hide behind lawyers or legal procedures. The raw disappointment in her parents' eyes hit harder than any court verdict could have. Dr. Townsend made one final manipulation attempt, calling my mother repeatedly and insisting she could salvage their relationship if she fought back against the medical board. His desperation revealed his true priorities. When she finally stopped taking his calls, his facade crumbled completely. My mother's last effort to justify her behavior came during a smaller family gathering. She tried explaining that she'd been lonely after the divorce, that Dr. Townsend had pursued her, that she'd never meant for things to go so far. The room remained silent as she spoke, her words falling flat against the weight of documented evidence. I sat across from her as she finally broke down completely. Through tears, she admitted to the relationship, to lying about Dr. Martinez retiring, to using my appointments to spend time with Dr. Townsend. The admission came in broken sentences punctuated by sobs. Family members witnessed her complete acknowledgement of wrongdoing. She agreed to enter therapy to address her boundary issues and manipulation tactics. The commitment came with strict family oversight and accountability measures. My grandmother insisted on regular check-ins and proof of attendance. The family structure that had enabled her behavior now became the framework for her rehabilitation. The medical board's preliminary ruling arrived 2 weeks later. Dr. Townsend's license was suspended pending the full investigation's completion. The suspension effectively ended his practice as no medical facility would risk employing him during an active ethics investigation. 6 months later, I sat in the waiting room of a female gynecologist I'd chosen myself. The selection process had taken time, with multiple consultations before I felt comfortable. My new doctor understood my history and maintained strict professional boundaries. My mother completed her mandated therapy sessions, slowly rebuilding trust through consistent actions rather than words. Dr. Townsend's medical license was permanently revoked after the full investigation concluded. Family relationships began healing through honest communication and respected boundaries. I emerged stronger and wiser, with an intact support system that had proven itself when tested. The price of standing up had been steep, but the victory was genuine. I was finally free to make my own medical decisions and build the autonomous life I'd fought to protect.